All right, hello, I'm Ryan, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate an example of when zero crossing edits are necessary over crossfades. A lot of times we have editing workflows where it's very simple to just make an edit and to apply boundary fades or crossfades and to move on and keep things as efficient as possible. But sometimes a crossfade, no matter how short, will create a chorusing sound as one part is faded out while the other is faded in, and that is recognizable and can't happen. So I'm going to demonstrate an example of when a zero crossing edit is the most important thing and a crossfade would be counterproductive. We thank the creator for our time today. Let's get into it. All right, so what I have here is a Pro Tools session with 2 vocal tracks in it. And this is a song I've been producing lately and working with a couple vocalists who are outstanding. So shout out to Julius Brown and Kirsten Kahn, the vocalists that we're seeing on screen here. I've taken the music out and everything. We're just going to focus on a couple simple edits in this exercise. So I'm going to press play and we're going to listen to their vocals overlap. And in this example, I didn't record them both at the same time. I had a recording session with Julius first, and I said, for a couple of the lines, I'd like you to hold out this phrase a little bit longer maybe than what would feel natural, because it's easier for me to cut something back than to stretch something out when I get into a recording session with Kirsten. And so we did a couple takes that way, and we have a couple of good takes here, but we have a little bit of editing to do on a couple of these phrases. So let's listen to what this pass sounds like.
You were always standing by in my distress. You were always standing by in my request.
Okay. So 2 phrases here in particular kind of stand out to us, and I'm just going to focus predominantly on the end phrase of each line, which is distress and request. And I just want to preface this with a discussion about elastic audio. Because one of the things that we notice about Julius's voice in particular compared to Kirsten's is that Julius has a very present vibrato. And when you are using elastic audio to compress or even vocal line, to compress lines or to extend them, especially if you are compressing them, the vibrato can become unnaturally fast. And there is a groove and a timing to his vibrato that sounds natural. So stretching in any way, shape, or form, whether it's compressing or expanding, is out of the question. And I want to work through his voice with an edit. So if I zoom into this phrase here, we can see the S in her line and the S in his. And I just want to bring this distance back, okay? So we like the timing of what she's done here and where we're at. We can see that her line kind of ends perfectly at this position here. And I'd like to do basically the same thing with his, is to pull this back some. So when we're editing vocals that have vibrato in them, I'm going to switch over into slip mode here. One of the easiest things to do is to take an entire vibrato wave out, whichever one we decide for that to be. So in order for the vibrato to maintain its natural flow, we take an entire vibrato wave out and close the gap, and you won't notice the difference, is what the idea is. That's what our target is, right? So as I look at this, there are a couple really obvious vibrato waves in here, and I could really cut out kind of either one of them. As I look at this one, his voice is still coming down in power, and then his power becomes kind of consistent from here to here, okay? So one of the things that I notice is that if I decided to take this wave out, I would also have to match gain. I'd probably have to increase the gain of this line and play around with that a little bit. Whereas if I take this one out, it's a much even gain at the beginning and the end of this selection here. And I could look at the next one, even here, and the gain is still similar, but his voice is starting to change shape slightly as he's coming down off of this line.
Distress.
Now he has a really clear and clean fundamental pitch on this.
Distress.
Okay? But his voice is changing a little bit in here as he's bringing a close to that line. And so the easiest place for me to make an edit here would be to take this vibrato out. So I'm going to make a selection here from about the middle of that wave to the middle of this one. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm using E, which is zoom toggle. And then I'll just take a step back. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this wave out, but I'm going to make a separation down here somewhere as well, because I'm about to pull these pieces closer together. So as I pull this closer together, what I'm looking for is a pattern in the waveform that I can match up. And as we take a close look at his voice is very consistent. It's very easy to see that there's kind of this 2 mountain peak on the wave here, followed by 1 with a gradual trail off. And that is the same pattern that is maintained basically through his entire performance here. So that actually is a very easy overlap to make. What I'm doing next is I'm looking for the nearest 0 volt line position where I could make the edit as seamlessly as possible. And it would probably be around like here when we're coming down off of this single part here. So there's that, there's this, and so that's the part that I'm really looking at to make an adjustment for. So if I let this wave come up a little bit more, and then I'm just going to take this part and kind of overlap it like this, and I'm kind of looking at that 0 volt position as well as the 2 wave overlap, and just see where the best pocket for that is. So I'm going to go like right here. And now I'm going to zoom in and just trim this back to that 0 volt line, which is going to be right around there, okay? And if we've done this perfectly, then we just won't hear any edit at all to this phrase.
Distress.
Okay? And that's nice and clean, and the vibrato is maintained, and it just sounds like he naturally sang it that way. And then I can do a little bit of elastic audio just to pull this S back to the grid, and we have a nice, clean, well-timed phrase between the two of them.
Distress.
Okay? And that is from a 0 crossing edit. And the point is, why can't I put a crossfade there? So if I undo a couple of my edits here, and if I just overlap this, right, not really paying too much attention, and I put a crossfade in here somewhere, and we solo this, and there's a little blip in there, so that's what you're actually trying to avoid. Technically, through this smooth take of his mono voice, there's a chorusing here that happens with 2 of his voices overlapping, and there's just a very slight blip there. And you have to keep in mind when you're listening to this in environments, if I were to listen to this in, a grocery store or something where it's just a mono mid-range speaker with that voice out front, that's definitely a little blip or a pop that we might notice, and it just can't happen. So we have to, protect our vocalists and kind of show them in the best light possible, right? And so we'll just re-overlap this again. And just get that nice and close in there. And one more time, we'll just trim this back. And we're right around there. And I'm just going to leave that right there, okay? So that's one. Now we're just going to move to the last phrase in here as well. And this one's going to work out a little bit different because I do want to take a vibrato part out here. And the only thing that's really changing here is that his gain structure is randomizing a little bit in here. So I could take out, this wave. I could take out this one. I could take out this one. And maybe that one might be the best one to do. And let's just kind of solo this and listen to when his voice really changes coming down off this line here.
Request.
So his voice is actually very consistent right up to here. That's when his voice changes into his head voice as he tails that off. So probably the easiest edit and the best edit for me to make is right on this wave. So I'm going to take this vibrato out, and I'm just trying to position my selection so that that peak is really right in the middle there. And I'm going to delete that. I don't have anything later in the timeline right there, But I do want to point out right now that the reason I'm not using shuffle mode, if any of you are wondering about that, is because if I were to close this gap, or if I were to make that delete, everything in the timeline would shift back, and that would be bad, right? So as a general rule, I don't use shuffle mode at all when I'm doing these kinds of edits because I don't want to make a mistake like that where everything in the timeline gets shifted. And we're going to pull this in and look for the same kind of pattern. We can see that on this phrase, the pattern of his voice is happening again. It's very easy to read. And so I'm going to trim this out a little bit until that line is coming up to the 0 volt line right there. And we'll just overlap this again right around, looking at that 0 volt line right there, actually. So I have that overlap of the two waves. That's easy to read, but I'm going to bring this back down right about there is where I want that edit to be. Now, there's a little bit of a difference with this because there actually is a slight gain structure difference. So this is where clip gain and the way that you can manipulate clip gain, especially in this program, is very useful to me. So I'm going to go Control-Shift-, which is going to bring up the clip gain line. In Pro Tools, if I go to View, I have Clip and Clip Gain line here. And what I want to do is just gradually reduce the gain on this part just a little bit. So I'm gonna, with the Smart tool, I command click to get the grabber tool to make a breakpoint right there. And I'm gonna make one at the end here and just bump that down a little bit. And then on this wave, I'm gonna click here and make a breakpoint at the beginning and just bump that up a little bit. Okay, so we are matching gain as tightly and as specifically as we can. And if I've made that 0 volt line edit perfectly on the 0 volt line, that edit shouldn't actually change at all. And we can see what's happened there, okay? So let's listen to this back and see if we pulled that together.
Request.
Okay, and remember his voice jumps and changes here, but we don't hear the edit. And you're listening for a pop or something to happen there and it's missing.
Request.
All right, and that's a clean edit. So that's a look at zero crossing edits. I hope that's helpful to you in some degree. Pro Tools, especially with the ability to kind of adjust clip gain on the fly like this to match up those gain spots, is extremely useful. And just the best editing program ever. So I hope that was beneficial to you. Thanks for watching. Go create something.